Hello and welcome to the SFIA 8 Beta Launch webinar. I'm Miroslav Pavlovic, a member of SFIA Design Authority, and I'm working and living in Chile. We are running 3 webinar sessions so that our global user base can find a live session convenient for them. For this webinar, we will be using the Zoom Q&A feature, so you can raise questions. We will try to answer some during the session, as other members of the Design Authority are on the hand to help. We will collect all questions from each sessions and send out to all attendees. We encourage a feedback and contact details will be available. Please get in touch to get involved or ask questions. Now I will pass the word to Jan, our Director of SFIA Foundation.
Thank you, Miroslav. As Miroslav mentioned, he's a member of the SFIA Design Authority. We have a number of the Design Authority on the call, and they will be helping to answer questions from the Q&A. To give you an idea of the spread of the Design Authority, we have Louise Smith from Australia, Daniel Merriott from New Zealand, Ralph Gockel from Germany, Miroslav Pavlovic from Chile, Matthew Burrows from the UK, myself, Ian Seward, based in the UK, Peter Leather, Software Design Authority, and indeed the Update Manager, Grant Nicholson from Australia, and Andy Thompson, who is also the chair of the SFIA Council. So these are the people that collate all of the changes and discuss and make decisions on those. I'll talk a little bit about the SFIA Council, SFIA Design Authority, sorry, later. So about this webinar, we have a varied audience. Some are SFIA experts with a long-term use of SFIA under their belt. Some are relatively new to SFIA. And of course, there are some people who just want to know what SFIA is doing. This webinar is intended to provide a summary of the SFIA 8 activity and point you at where you can find the beta release. It is not a deep dive into individual changes or content, but we will explain the changes that have been made. And it will touch on additional SFIA assets for the purposes of illustration, and the focus will be very much informative and enable you to comment during this beta period. So a brief introduction to the update process. Many of you will probably have seen this diagram or its equivalent in various guises. We have a very long history. SFIA is over 20 years old, but we update every 3 years. Any longer than 3 years, and things would get very stale when you have an industry that changes ever more quickly. SFIA is a story of evolution, and we build on what has gone before. SFIA 8 is very definitely an evolution of SFIA 7. We've responded to industry developments and themes. We've built the infrastructure to support the global ecosystem. We've linked to over 40 bodies of knowledge, developed various SFIA views to help navigate in different environments, and we've provided usage guidance and collaborated with many organizations, sector bodies, and indeed other frameworks. And we've also provided some standard or sample role profiles to help people get an idea about how to use SFIA if they are particularly new to it. But in every update, we have returned to our context, and in particular, wanting to make sure that a new version of SFIA continues to support industry in what they want to do with addressing skills and competencies. So what is the consultation process? Essentially, we do 3 things. We find out what industry wants, we work out what the options are for SFIA, what SFIA can do. And then we check back with industry through testing and through the beta release to determine whether we have it right. And at that point, we will then release the final version. In finding out what industry wants, we follow some themes. We have workshops with various groups around the world. We have direct input from industry end users. We have dialogue with industry bodies, input from the SFIA Council, and indeed the SFIA Design Authority. We've learned some lessons from SFIA 7. We conduct some research and investigations, and we also have the formal change request mechanism. The importance of themes is huge. Themes actually give us an opportunity to review the SFIA framework as a whole and not just focus on one skill or another. And we'll talk a little bit about the themes that have figured very heavily in that in the next few slides. In deciding what we can do with SFIA, it really falls into a number of areas. We can change the SFIA framework, and that is then visible as a new version of SFIA. We can develop a SFIA view, or we can provide some SFIA guidance material, which might be seen as ancillary to the framework. We can also, of course, do nothing. And if we do nothing, we try and explain why. But the essence of that is there's a new framework to come, and there will be tools and resources updated to reflect how the SFIA framework has changed. All of this work is done by volunteers, working groups, and the role of the design authority is to ensure that what we do in the next version of SFIA fits in with our design principles and also continues to meet the industry's needs. And its visibility throughout. Next slide then, please. So where are we? Where's the timeline? We are just entering beta launch. So over the last 14 months, 15 months or so, we have been looking at change requests, key themes, and the work of working groups and volunteers. And what we have created is the SFIA 8 beta. This is the first time that everything has come together as a complete framework. And it's now an opportunity for the industry to take a look and provide feedback. During the next few weeks, whilst people are providing feedback, we will obviously act on that feedback, but the rest of the activities will be along the lines of absolutely active testing. We will maintain and publish our change log so that we can see how SFIA 8 is coming together finally. There is some work to do on navigation and the categories, subcategories we use in SFIA. We have to design the materials that we will be publishing. The website materials are there, but there are various items, PDF documents, Excel, etc., that people want to have as downloads. And we'll be initiating the translations. We currently translate into 11 languages. That was SFIA 7. We have 2 more in the pipeline, so we can expect SFIA 8 in 13 languages. At the point of beta close, sometime in August, we will freeze what we have. We will do the finalizing of the SFIA 8, and then we expect to launch SFIA 8 formally within September. So why do we have a beta version? The fairly obvious reason is we want your feedback. SFIA is built by the community, and we want the community to tell us what you like and what you don't like. It is important to tell us what you like. Otherwise, those that tell us what they don't like could win out. So please, please do give us feedback. There has been some change to the scope of SFIA in the SFIA 8 beta. We want to know your thoughts. There has been changes to content. The content of individual skills has also changed, including some name changes. And one of the biggest themes that we followed was readability. We wanted to improve the way SFIA is presented and improve the detailed readability of the framework, and Peter will talk a little bit more about that shortly. There is also the basic spelling, grammar, punctuation, proofreading to be done. The other reason for the beta is to provide early sight of SFIA 8 for everyone. Visibility has been there over the last 14 months or so, but as I said, this is the first time the whole framework is available to view. We have employers and partners and various other users who may need to plan for the next version of SFIA, and this gives them a bit of time to see what is coming along. We will now work to refresh the presentation on supporting assets, initiate the translations, etc. But do be aware that some skills and features that you see in SFIA 8 may still be modified prior to the final launch, and of course, some things may not be released. So on to providing feedback. Various mechanisms for providing feedback. The first is obviously emailing the update manager, Peter Leather, at updates@sfia-online.org. If you can't find something, if you have a question or you have some feedback, you can email Peter directly. You can raise change requests, but for the next few weeks, please make sure that those, or please reserve those change requests for changes to the content of the beta rather than general change requests. And please, where possible, include the 4-letter code in the title, as it helps us to collate those. With regards to detailed comments on skills, the content of skills, perhaps typos, grammar, or rewording, etc., we are providing a Microsoft Word documents on the site, and you can download those, update them, and email them to updates@sfia-online.org, as they may actually be the easiest way of getting your feedback. And we will be looking to arrange some deep dive web meetings to talk about specific themes and aspects of SFIA 8 over the next few weeks. So with that, I'll hand over to Peter Leather, our update manager. He has been pulling all of the content together into the SFIA 8 beta, and he will now go through the various elements that form this beta release. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Ian, and hello, everyone. Thanks for coming to the webinar. Just to repeat what Ian said, in the position I've got here, I've seen the enormous amount of effort and insights that volunteers have provided to help us with SFIA 8. I can see on the participant list a number of people who've really helped us progress things and take things forward, and not just on this release, but previous ones as well. So that's something that's really encouraging to see. And it really emphasizes that what we're putting together is done on a volunteer aspect. It's a community-based thing. It feels different than working on a commercial product or anything like that. It's something that we're doing to help each other. And part of this is to ask for more help from yourselves to help us check and review things. One thing that's really helpful as we go through this, I'm going to be dipping into some of the detail. So please make use of the question and answer feature that we've got on this webinar, because that helps us understand where the questions might be coming from. It gives you a chance to get your question answered and for us to share the questions you have asked and the answers given with other people who may well have similar questions. So please dip in. That's a really useful way to keep us in touch with what you're thinking and what your ideas are. So what I'm going to start off with is just to expand on something Ian mentioned about evolution of the framework. So we have a phrase we use, evolution, not revolution. And that's really important with a framework that is as long lasting as SFIA has been, that we have a long heritage of people using the framework, people and organizations using it, embedded in how they work with their people. So we want to make sure that each update helps people move forward and doesn't seem a big barrier. So it wants to be evolution to help them move forward to the new skills that we're describing and the new ways we might be putting them in the framework, but not such a big change that people are saying, well, oh, what happened there? That doesn't look like SFIA anymore. So I'm going to touch on a couple of points. One is around the content of SFIA, so where we add new skills. And then the other one is how we are presenting the skills and how that's an evolution as well. So this slide here, I'm just going to give some examples, and it's to give us a sense of why we may be adding new skills in there, and why, you know, it's something you can take advantage of or not, depending on the areas that you focus on in your roles, in your organizations, and the way you use SFIA. So on the top left, top right, we have an area of computational science. So this is a new area for SFIA, which is really focused on scientists who operate in fields like meteorology, defense, nuclear science, and they make use of fairly specialized computational techniques in order to do their work. Prior to that skill coming into SFIA, the only things that they would have seen in SFIA would have been the people who would come and put the kit on their desks, or, you know, look after the networks and items like that. So the overlap with the SFIA framework directly to them is fairly small, but they were interested in using SFIA. They liked the framework, the 1 to 7 and the generic attributes, and the way SFIA describes skills. So members of the design authority worked with the scientists from those groups and developed 3 skills that are now going to form part of the framework. So it's an add-on. It's taken us in a different direction, but it's building on and harmonizing on the strength of SFIA to do that. So that's one type of evolution where we're stretching out into a new area. If I pick on the area of, let's pick on security, that's an area where there's a much bigger overlap. So we have many skills in SFIA describing security, and they've been in there from the very earliest days. But on talking to some more specialized security organizations, so in defense, for example, or providers of specialized security products, some of the skills that we describe in SFIA aren't directly applicable to them. But again, they like the framework, they like the fact that the security skills described there. And so the request was more about how can we extend what we've got in SFIA to develop some skills in security that are more for those specialist organizations and those specialist roles. So the evolution there is more of an overlap, but you know, an extension there where we will see some skills that won't be applicable to the mainstream security roles that we might see in organizations who currently use SFIA, but they're a useful add-in there. And it helps to position, if you are a security professional, you know, you can see some of those skills that you may have ambitions to move into as well. So that's another type of evolution. Sitting next to it on there is one around the new skill we've got, which is about personal data protection. And that has been described in SFIA for some time, but it actually was part of another skill. And the other skill was called information governance. Now, with the importance around privacy and personal data protection, there are roles out there who do that, but they don't do the rest of what's in information governance. So what we looked to do there was to evolve the model and to bubble out of there a separate skill that has some overlaps with our securities professionals, but is something distinct and unique there. And by creating a new skill, we're able to then give a chance for the people who specialize in that area to have something that works for them, rather than trying to look at information governance and pick out of those the 1 or 2 bullet points that were relevant to them. So the splitting out is another sort of form of evolution that we have, and there's a couple of other examples that I'll touch on later. And then a final example of evolution which we're proposing is with a skill SYSP, the code for system software. And that again has been in SFIA for some time and has been of great use. But as the working practices and technologies have matured, what we're seeing is a far greater overlap with a more generic IT infrastructure skill, which again has been in SFIA for some time. So our proposal there is to do the opposite of what I said with the privacy one, but actually to bring skills together with a view that for most roles using that skill, that's a better way for them to think about it, that systems programming, updating system software, it is part of what they do rather than, you know, full standalone. And the other one on here, data science, I'll go into some more detail, but that's much more equivalent to the approach with security. So what I've given there is just four types of evolution of content. And again, when we look at the bulk of what's in SFIA 7, you know, it is the same. We're adding things in there. And the more we you know, work with SFIA in this way, we have skills that will be relevant to certain specialist areas, but not to others. And then what our trick in SFIA is to help users navigate to what they need. And if they don't need skills, if they're not in the field of computational science, then that shouldn't get in their way of using SFIA. And then just before I leave this slide, some of the unattached bubbles are really a flag for the future. It's almost certain that there are areas out there who will be interested in joining into SFIA at some point, and that will be how we work with future releases where people are interested, and organizations and parts of the industry, and we can plug them into SFIA using the 1 to 7 model that people really like. So that's the base of evolution around content. And then what we've got around the readability, what we're trying to do here is to make sure that the content we've got, where we don't need to change the content, but we can improve the way we present it. And this makes it easier for people, whether new users of SFIA or existing users of SFIA, to get the best out of SFIA. And it gives us a chance to rationalize some of the way we present the information. Over time, we've had, I guess, a number of different people writing skills, and they've evolved over time. So this is a chance to bring things into a more consistent manner. We have to be careful how much we do in this space, because SFIA is used in so many different ways and so many different by so many different organizations. So we want to keep that flexibility. And we do that by making the data very open. People can download it and cut and paste it into various tools or documents that they use themselves. And that might be SFIA partners who create tools that people can use, or it could be end user organizations picking up and use it in that way. So what we can explain here is how we can put things into the SFIA website and the SFIA Foundation documents. But of course, we keep it flexible, and we really encourage people to pick it up and use it in the ways that work for them. The other point about the making things better in the English is it makes it easier for the translation process. So what I'm going to do here is just a bit of a graphical explanation of why we think this is a evolution rather than revolution. So here's a screen print of the SFIA 7 scale systems design on the website. And what we can see here is we have the hopefully fairly familiar definition, where we have a overall skill description, which is the section in bold at the top of the page. And then we have each of the levels described. And around the page, we have generic attributes, the SFIA views, and the rest of the skills. What we've added already for SFIA 7 is a feature to help people navigate, which is using related skills, and that's proved very popular. So when we look at what SFIA 8 looks like on the website now, it looks very similar. So we've got the same wraparound, we've got the same related skills. What has changed is that instead of having one big paragraph at the top, SFIA 7, SFIA 8, we're now breaking this down and saying the information that's in that big paragraph, we think if we split that out into a nice, short, concise description of what the skill is, plus a separate format for the guidance, the scope that's described in that long paragraph. That's a better way of doing it. That gives us flexibility for people who are familiar with the framework, don't have to wade through a big description. People who want to have a quick understanding of what we mean by, in this case, system design, can get that in a short sentence. Then if that is the area they're interested in, they can read further on. So it's trying to make it a bit easier to use and to navigate. Just to expand on that, so here's another skill where we're showing the same thing, but just enlarged. So for data modeling and design, again, we have an overall description with a paragraph of a few sentences. And what we've done is then split that out to a short sentence, a shorter sentence, and we've created that as a maximum of 20 words, which fits quite nicely into most applications that we have for it. And then pulled out the wording from the overall description, but also looked within some of the skill level descriptions. And those of you familiar with the framework will know that occasionally in there might be things that say, for example, this, or give specific examples of the skill in use at the levels. So we've also, where it makes sense, pull those out into these guidance notes as well. So it adds another layer to it, an easier way to understand what's in there, and it allows us to do as it says at the bottom of the screen, help people select the skills that are relevant to them quickly, help people choose between similar SFIA skills so they can actually compare in a simpler way, is this the right skill that I'm looking for? And then with those guidance notes, understand the scope of the skill. So that might be in selecting it or looking at the levels of responsibility and saying, yes, I do this sort of activity, and then this is how it applies to the levels that I display. So that's what the readability is primarily about. We've also taken the advantage of, once we've got those short 20-word maximum skill titles, it can then help with how we display web pages, and it's particularly advantageous when you're looking at smaller screens, mobile devices. So the one on the right gives us a way of not just having the name, but having that short description lined up next to it, which adds value to people browsing the framework and seeing what's in there. And without having to click on a skill, they can get the idea of what the skill's about, and then that helps them decide whether that is the one they want to explore, or actually that isn't the thing I was looking for. That's kind of a side effect to having this. So I'm now going to do a bit of a deep dive into some of the content, but before I do that, just a reflection on the readability on the right-hand side of the screen here. We had some very, very long sentences in SFIA. Some of the sentences in English were over 50 words long, and that's not great to read, not great to understand, and not great to translate. So what we've done is remove any sentences that were over 30 words long, and we've removed most sentences that were more than 20 words long. So what should be noticeable as a reader of what's left in the framework now would be shorter sentences that are easy to understand because they're not made of lots of subparts and semicolons and clauses to them, and sentences that are simpler to use, and of course then simpler to translate. So that's what should be quite noticeable. It does mean there's more sentences in some places, but they're much shorter and easy to work. So that's the net result of the readability. Hopefully that will be something that people easily notice, and we've had good feedback on that so far. For the next part of this, I'm going to look at the content. So the headline figures that we have got 23 additional skills planned for SFIA 8, but 5 skills replaced. So that gives us a net addition of 18. And the bubble diagram that we saw earlier gave you some examples of where those additional skills are, and I will talk about some others as we go forward. We've got 5 skills renamed where we think that the terminology we're using could be refreshed. And I'll give you an easy example. We had a long-lived SFIA skill called security administration, and we're proposing that should be now changed to security operations, which kind of reflects what the industry is calling that, and is a much better reflection of what people using that skill do, rather than it being a purely administrative activity. It's something much more dynamic than that. We have also restructured some of the skills. So what that kind of means, if we look at some skills we had where the levels we've got in there and the scope of them, we can actually take steps to refresh some of those and update them a bit to give them more relevance to today's world. The net effect around the levels is that we've got 24 skill levels added. That's not including the new skills, so that's 2 existing skills, and 5 skill levels have been moved or replaced. So some may have moved from one skill to another, partly to do with that bubbling out effect I described earlier on, where we might take out some elements of a skill and create a new one. So that is the summary of the content changes. The next 2 slides I'm going to give some more examples I won't read through everything here, but once you've got the slides, this gives you a reasonable summary of what's in there, and a chance to explore on those. So I'll just pick out some of these to give a sense of what's in there. I've talked about computational science already and security, so let me talk about the data science one. So what we're seeing there is an increased interest. Everyone will have seen that around data science, machine learning, and the importance of data as developing new products and helping people run their businesses more effectively. And there's a clear an increased blurring between some of the roles that we might have thought about as IT versus business type roles. And when we've talked to people who are in those roles or managing teams in those roles, they're wanting to have a clear distinction, be something generic that we used to call analytics, that had a broad range of activities within there. Analytics mentioned machine learning going all the way back to SFIA version 4, so it's been around. But to help them recruit or distinguish between the skills they need to develop and the roles they need, we've tried to make that a bit clearer, the differences between data science, business intelligence, machine learning, and also some of the more engineering skills. So we've got a new skill called data engineering. In doing this, we can bring other roles, business-focused roles, into using SFIA and harmonize them around the SFIA 1-7 model. Business analysis, that's one where we're kind of bubbling out into 2, and that's to give some flexibility in terms of the way that business analysts use create their roles. And there's also a feeling that just having a single skill called business analysis tended to give the impression that business analysts just need one skill. So we're looking to support that. That'll be good to get some feedback on in terms of breaking that out and giving more granularity and insights to the type of skills used by business analysts. And in the same way, other roles, we may look at that feasibility assessment skill, for example, and say, actually, that's something I do, but I would never have chosen that because the title was business analysis and I didn't think that applied to me. Investment appraisal, so that's a sort of an add-on around the role around portfolio, project selectment, financial management, but it's not actually something that actually is referred to in any of those skills. So it's a gap that we can fill. May not be used by too many roles, but it fills the space around the area around finance and feasibility and portfolio management. Service catalogue management, that's one as an example that came out by a mapping of SFIA to the new version of ITIL 4. And it became something we thought, well, actually, there's a clear gap in there that we could fill. And that will be a special interest for service management organizations and service management roles to be able to pick up on that skill and to have a good map into what's in ITIL. For the rest of ITIL 4, we had really good matches to what we had in SFIA 7, so there's no major actions needed. So that's some examples of what we've got here. The first 3 rows on this one are all around people and skills management. Now, the importance of that since the early days of SFIA has obviously been clear, but the pressure on closing skills gaps, whether at a country level, an industry level, an employer level, or an individual level, is never been more important than it is now. And we're also trying to reflect some of the different working practices that we might see in organizations where teams are not being run necessarily in a strict top-down management hierarchy type manner. So we have different ways of working where people have self-organizing teams or practices or squads and guilds and tribes and things like that. So we're trying to help organizations to have a more granular set of people management skills so they can pick and choose those that work better for the way that they describe things. We've also refreshed the skill we had with performance management, again, to try and reflect a more up-to-date way of thinking about how people work in teams and groups to do that. One of the areas that is of interest is around skills management, and we had a skill called resourcing, which kind of referred to workforce planning. But on deep inspection around that one, we felt that it was important to, because it was different roles really and different people who took on the the task of workforce planning, that if we had it mixed up in a resourcing skill, which talked about recruitment and resource deployment and more tactical activities, that maybe it wasn't an easy skill to use for people who specialised in workforce planning. And as a side effect, workforce planning is such a critical skill to SFIA, you know, the opportunity to help people do some long-term planning about the skills they use. SFIA is key to that, so it felt a really good fit. So we brought that out separately. Certifications, digital badging, you know, really taken off as a tool and as a way of helping people develop their skills and get recognition for that, and as a way for employers and organizations, service organizations and training providers to demonstrate the value of their products. But within SFIA, we didn't actually have a skill around how you can operate those schemes. So we thought we'd find a home for it in an existing skill, but upon inspection and looking around, we thought actually this is something different, and it's in everyone's interest that we try and bring out the skills that are needed to implement those schemes effectively, because that's something that you know, has a big impact on people who get those badges, but also people who run those schemes. So that's something we've brought out there. Now, the last two, business administration. So this is something, it's actually been, it was a request as part of SFIA 7, so an example of how we get requests and we're not always just say, yes, let's do it. So we've thought around this one and thought, actually, this is a good time to bring this in for a couple of reasons. It's a not a technology specific skill, but so many technology organizations will have roles who have this skill and work around and with technology people. So we thought this is something to bring in and help either mapping of roles to teams and organizations. We know many people use SFIA far beyond their their IT teams, so this helps them as well. And it also helps with sort of career paths that may start off in more non-technical roles, but they may build into technical career steps and roles. So that's that one there. And it's not just a very basic admin. We've got it stretched into some senior leadership levels as well to support that. And then the final one on the screen, which was some great work on this done quite recently. The teaching skill has been around SFIA for a number of years, but when we looked at that from a readability perspective and then started to really get into what it was saying, we thought it was a real opportunity to do a number of things, which was split out the concept of teaching from the idea of subject formation. So subject formation would be developing curricula for what you are going to teach, and teaching would be delivering that curriculum and assessing students and pupils through that. So it felt useful to reflect the fact that in industry there may be many teachers who never go anywhere near subject formation, and so we can actually split that skill out and help people see the difference between the two. And in doing that, we've also been able to make it a bit clearer the difference between training, learning, delivery that we have in other skills in SFIA, and the skill around teaching. So we've got an enhanced description of teaching in SFIA now. And finally, we took an opportunity to increase the number of levels. So it used to just have 2 levels, and now it's got levels stretching from trainee teacher all the way through to program directors in universities, the levels they might use. So that's a nice change there, which gives enhanced support, which again will not be for all organizations, but certainly relevant to academic and institutions like that. I'm just going to take a pause now because I've got a question. From Peter Leeson. The answer to that, Peter, so Peter was asking, I don't know if everyone can see this, asking about the complete list of skills and processes for any IT organization listed in Ticket Plus. I personally haven't seen that list, Peter, so that's something you're able to share. That would be really useful. Always keen to have some mappings to industry references, because it either helps us see where we do match, or if there are gaps and we think there are gaps that we could fill in SFIA, then it gives us a good touch point to do that. Right, so to continue. So the other key part we have around SFIA is our levels of responsibility. Now they form the backbone of what's in SFIA. Really, really important to how we do things. They explain the levels 1 to 7. And the one thing we picked up around this consultation was a request to look at behaviors and soft skills in SFIA. So we started with an open mind, and we had a great working group based primarily in Australia looking at this. And they looked around at different behavioral models that exist around in the industry, and whether those are things that we should either align to SFIA or work with from a SFIA perspective, or should we even create SFIA's own behavioral model. But where they got to with the thinking was actually, when we look at what's in SFIA's levels of responsibility, the generic attributes that you'll be familiar with, autonomy, influence, complexity, knowledge, and business skills, actually they contain a lot of the behaviors that we might also find in standalone models. So we thought it would be a really useful thing not to create our own, but to give a different way of using the levels of responsibility for those organizations who don't have their own behavioral model. So we've created a standalone document, a glossary that is available on the website now, which takes a different look, a different cut, a different way of grouping all the descriptors in the levels of responsibility, but aligns them up with some recognizable behavioral factors, such as communication or problem solving. And what we think that's really useful doing this way around is it makes it more optional for organizations who need to fill a gap. They can look at that way around. If organizations already have their behavioral or soft skills modeled, then they can continue using that. And what we've got is a flexible way of using what's in SFIA to help with that. At the moment, the document is fairly basic. It's very functional, but we are looking at ways to make that, I guess, more graphical and help people see what's in there, and at the same time look at how we can improve the presentation of our levels of responsibility. We know they're really key, but we're also very keen on finding ways to get the power of those across to people in maybe some different ways of presenting those. So that's what's been done and what's planned in the space of behaviors. So what I'm going to just lead on to now is the change log. Now this is a real detailed look at what's in the new version of SFIA 8. So it might not be for everyone, but where it comes from is a tool that I'd started using for SFIA 7 to track the changes. But I wanted to, having done that, I thought, why don't I just have this more visible while we're going through the process of building SFIA 8? And so that gives a chance for people to see the scope of the changes that are in there, what the status of each of the SFIA 7 skills is, and where the new skills are coming in. And then if you want even more detail, we've got a list of the detailed change impact, which goes down to every level of every skill and says what's happened to that for SFIA 8. So it gives a scale of the change. Some haven't been touched at all, some have been touched for readability, some have been touched for content. The change might be small, medium or large. Some levels are deleted, etc., etc. So that is available. Again, links are on the website. I'll give you those details in a minute. And if you look at that, the list of skills, we can see the ones that are mainly impacted on the blue columns. That's the one that say there's readability changes. Where they're impacted in the green and yellow, that's changes to the content. And then we've got the list of new skills, which are listed at the bottom of the sheet. So it gives you a sense of what's in there. So that might be a useful way if you want to see what's new and have a comprehensive list of what there is to find in SFIA 8. And then finally, on each of the SFIA 8 pages, there's a feature we had last time around as well, which is a little tick box where if you tick that box, you get a view of the changes from SFIA 7. And it just shows you that the text that's been added is in green and the text that's been removed is in red. That works better for some skills than others, I have to say. So if there's a large number of changes or even a lot of shifting around of the words, it can look a bit messy. But where there's a small number of changes, it works really well at instantly highlighting what has changed and what hasn't. So please take advantage of that as well. Now, Ian mentioned on his initial diagram the sort of evolution of some of the wraparound tools and resources, as we've been calling them, that go around SFIA. And what we're trying to do is to make sure we clearly distinguish between what is the core SFIA framework. So that's where we spend our attention, make sure that is updated appropriately every new version. And then the bit which is how do people access that framework. Many of the things we've been doing over the last few years have been to start to build in this space, and that's all driven by requests from the community, where we see recurring questions about, well, how do we use SFIA for this, or could you explain how it's used in this area? How does it map to things like COBIT or ITIL, etc.? So we're sort of trying to build up that resource as we go. This presentation layer, as I've called it on here, is something that we've got within the SFIA Foundation website and documents. But of course, it's other stuff that many of the SFIA partners and employers who use SFIA also provide in terms of the way that they access that core framework. And we're really, really keen to make sure that the data in the SFIA framework is available and can be used in many different ways. And we encourage people to pick it up and use it in different ways. That's unlike some other skills frameworks where it's kind of hidden, locked, not accessible at all. So please make use of it, and look at what we've done at the SFIA Foundation to help it easy to use, but be inspired by that. Share what you've done in your own ways. We're really interested in that as an approach. So I'm going to just go through some of these. The views as an example is where we this time for SFIA 7, a similar time when we launched it, we talked about the views as a way to help people navigate. But at that idea, that was just a bit of slideware. I put together some slides and that was it. Between now and then, we've now developed them so that they actually appear as a functionality on the website. You can select a view and you can browse the view in the same way you can browse the full framework. An example of us evolving the tools and resources as we go from being a paper-based thing to something that's more interactive. And it's similar to across the other boxes on here. With SFIA 8, we have the opportunity, or in some cases, the need to make sure we update them. So where we've updated SFIA 8 skills, we need to update the SFIA 7 views to make sure they reflect the new skills and give people a chance to see how those new skills are applicable to the different views. With the mappings have a twofold interest. So we've used the mappings to help us do a gap analysis against SFIA 7. So we poured over the the security frameworks as an example, and worked out where the gaps were in SFIA 7, where we matched them well, and that gave us some ideas about where we might need new skills or new levels to support that. This is an example of one of the views. So just picking up on security. So what we've done with the security view is pick up on the skills that are in SFIA 8, and we're trying to make demonstrate really where the skills in SFIA support security, but not just for people who are security professionals whose roles are dedicated to security. So we can display those in the ones in the red. On the SFIA site, they're not color coded. This is just to make the slide work. So we have skills for dedicated security professionals, but we also have a number of other roles who are key to making security happen as part of their day job. So we've highlighted here secure software development, and indeed the secure infrastructure. So those are skills that are relevant to security, but they may not be skills that have security in their title, for example. They will most likely have security reference somewhere in their skill descriptions. And those roles who are relevant to security, but they aren't actually security professionals. Over on the right-hand side, we can look at how we might manage in the sort of management of the security teams and the security workforce in terms of developing, attracting and working with security employees. So what you'll see is these skills are exactly the same as the ones within the main framework. By putting them in a different context, we make them more accessible to security organizations. Can we thank Matthew? Thanks for that prompt there. That's a really good question from Peter, as we would expect. Let me come back to that one. In fact, it might be one that Ian could pick up on while I'm talking. Probably I can't think of that at the same time as talking. So let me progress and then pass the ball to Ian on that one. So continue on the views. Now here's another view, and just again we could have showed you any number of them, but it's just a way of showing what we're doing is shuffling the pack, putting things into different categories, giving people a different way of viewing the entire framework and helping them with accessing SFIA and getting the value out of SFIA that they might otherwise not be able to do if they can't see the things they're looking for. Now that's the views are kind of a macro way of looking at some of those, and the other thing we've posted is stuff we've been working on for a while, which is actually some illustrative skills profiles for common jobs and roles within the industry. So this answers the question in two things it helps us with. One, it helps with people who are new to SFIA, and they kind of want to know, well, does it cover what I need to find, or the way that I work, or the job that I do? So we're trying to give a very loose mapping. It's not a definitive. It's not a, you must do it this way. It's a quick start, an introduction to how you might find the types of roles you're interested in and the skills that you might use in SFIA to map to those. And we've done it in a way that says, there's likely to be some skills that are, almost certainly ones you'll use, but depending on the context of your job, we know that job titles are used in many different ways in many different organizations. So someone called a data scientist in one organization is likely to be something a little bit different than the same job title in a different organization. So that's the flexibility of SFIA. It allows us to be mix and match according to context and role design and organization design. So that's available there. We think that will be of great interest and use. And particularly with SFIA 8, this is why we wanted to release it now, even though it's not complete, if it ever will be complete, but it gives us a chance to pick up on some of the new skills in SFIA. For example, the data science one, the data engineering one, the machine learning one in this example here. And the design of the documents, again, Ian touched on that. We want to make the documentation that goes with SFIA as good as we can, but we need feedback on what people need. Some of the documents work really well for new people trying to get an idea of what's in SFIA. Some of the documents work well as working documents for experienced users of SFIA, and it kind of helps us to design those so we know where the uses of these documents might be. We have had a history of creating paper documents based on PDFs. So the feedback we've had so far is people want to retain the PDFs as a useful way to access it. So that's what we are planning to do. If people have got other thoughts or ideas or different documents we could produce, then please let us know. And if there's any people with graphic design skills or budding graphic designers who think they could help us, your help would be much appreciated. So finally, just to finish off, this stuff is already on the site now. You can go to the SFIA 8 site. We've now labeled it SFIA 8 Beta, and I've got a long list of links there for you to explore, which is a mix of some of the browsable stuff on the web with some of the working documents that hopefully would help you review what's in there. A note on the working documents, they are not formatted as we expect to see them at the final release, so they are rough and ready, but they're based on being useful to use rather than useful to look at. So please take a look what's in there, and we look forward to getting your feedback on what we've got. I am quite interested in having some people who volunteer to do some of the brute force proofreading. If I can, the more people I can get to do that, the easier job it is. So if you are willing to do that, that will be very helpful. So drop me a note if you can do that for me. And I'm going to stop now, just about on time. And Ian, can you answer that question that Peter?
Yes, I will. Yes. So Peter Leeson has asked the question, As the support moves from printed to online, is there consideration for smaller changes and corrections to be accepted and integrated into the standard more frequently rather than waiting 3 years for a full release? The short answer is we're thinking about it. The slightly longer answer is we have settled on a 3-year cycle because 4 years is too long, 5 years is too long, 6 years is too long. But there are people that want a high degree of stability. So is 6 months too short? The cost of updating a framework is immense. The effort involved is immense. But what we have built is the infrastructure to enable us to do that. So it would be possible to include changes more frequently, but that might be inconvenient to the industry, and we need to resolve that question before we do it. The reality is that once SFIA 8 has been released, we will be thinking about what is happening for SFIA 9. And of course, there are organizations already saying, we'd like to be involved and we've got some ideas. And so it is very likely that we will be able to see SFIA 9 being built in such a way that things could be taken as going to be in the next release. But we do have to think about those people that build tools, build support mechanisms. The framework can't change too quickly. Other questions seem to be being answered quite quickly online by Matthew. He's doing a fantastic job again. We'll continue to answer a few questions as they come along in the Q&A for the next few minutes, but I think at that point we should call the webinar to a close. And as Miroslav said at the beginning, we will be, the recording is going, we will be making the recordings available, and we will also consolidate the Q&As from each of the sessions we've held and make that available too. So with that, I'll say thank you very much, and we will continue to add Q&As for a while, but I'll say thank you very much, and thank you for coming.